Hello and welcome back everyone to Adobe Live here in the UK from the sofa. Happy Monday everyone. I see a lot of you are back in the chat. I hope you had a good weekend, as good as it can be during these days. Today we have Liah as our guest. Welcome Liah. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good. And whereabout are you based?
I'm in Edinburgh today. It's pretty cloudy, but it was nice and sunny earlier. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Scotland.
So we have someone else from Scotland, and of course we have Emma, our new community manager. Hi Emma, how are you?
Hi, I'm very good, very good. Nice to see someone from Scotland today. I lived in Edinburgh, so I'm really happy to have a bit of the Scottish, insight today. So great having you, Liah. I'm excited to see what you have in store for us.
Brilliant. And if you guys do have any questions, pop them in the chat and Emma and I will read them out loud to Liah. But first of all, introduce yourself, Liah. What are you doing?
Yeah, so I guess I'm going to do a bit of background and then I'll kind of crack into what I'm doing. I'm going to keep it fairly simple today. It's going to be kind of showing you my process and some of the techniques that I use, and I'll be creating a poster. But hopefully, can you see my screen at the moment? So hopefully you can see a photograph of Edinburgh. So yeah, this is where I live in Edinburgh. This is a photo taken by a friend of mine, Adam Wilson. And it's such a beautiful city. It's full of old buildings and really good food as well. Emma, you used to live there, so you'll know all about that.
Definitely.
And yeah, so it's in Scotland. Scotland is such a brilliant creative community. I feel so lucky to be part of it. There's always so much going on. Everyone's so friendly and lovely, and I feel like everyone kind of knows each other. It's quite a small community, and everyone's kind of looking out for each other. So I've got some examples of, some of the things that are going on in Scotland over here. And it's so great that, Adobe is highlighting people outside of London as well, because there is so much talent out there. So these are some of the places that I go to and just to get my inspiration. And I'm a senior designer at a creative agency called Whitespace in Edinburgh. So these are some of the Whitespacers. I think there's 70 of us roughly. And we do everything from designing websites, print, brand, campaigns, animation, AR, VR. I'm probably missing stuff, but all sorts of different kind of creative areas. And I've been there for 7 years. And for the first 4 years, I was on the kind of the digital team, and I was doing a lot of website design, social posts, and that kind of thing. And then my design director left, and I felt like I needed a bit of a change. So I moved on to the print and brand team, where I've been for the last 3 years. And it's great because we always do a bit of everything. It's quite a diverse workload that we have. So it's such a fantastic place to work, and the culture is so fantastic there. Aside from kind of my day job, I'm also involved in Whitespace Women, which is an initiative to try and get more women into the creative industry. When I was starting out, there weren't that many kind of female role models, so that was kind of something that was close to my heart. And we have free events where we try to find out what the barriers are and to try and find ways to help people overcome them. So we've had learn how to network, we've had portfolio reviews, confidence building workshops, all kinds of stuff, which is great. And I also do mentoring as well with students. So I work with students from Edinburgh College and Edinburgh College of Art. So yeah, I try and do this kind of stuff on the side. I think the creative industry as a whole, it would be better. I would like to see more diversity. I think it's wider than just gender. It's a diversity thing, but yeah, so that's kind of some of the stuff I'm doing in the background. And then cracking into some of the work that I do, to give you some examples. Top right there is the Edinburgh Festival Fringe campaign. So the Edinburgh Festival Fringe is one of the biggest arts festivals in the world, I think. And I got to work on this campaign a couple of years ago, which was it was amazing. It was a dream client, and it was so creatively freeing. And I came up with the concept of kind of stepping into the unknown, because you never know what you're going to find in the Fringe. And I kind of was the art director.
Good and bad, right?
Yeah. Some of them can be quite hit and miss. But I worked with a really talented 3D and motion designer called Mateus, and he brought this to life. And I think collaboration is a really important part of my process. I think, you know, the work is always going to be much better when you're collaborating. So that was a piece of work that I did through Whitespace. And I also recently worked on Rena through Whitespace as well, which you can see there, which was brand identity for Leonardo Hotels for their spas, which was a lovely little project to work on. And we wanted to keep it quite serene. And Rena, the name that we came up with, is based off of Renaissance, because the naming roots go back to Leonardo da Vinci of the hotels. So quite a nice link there, but it also just sounds quite nice to say. So those are some Whitespace projects up the top. And then down the bottom, I do a lot of personal projects, side projects. I think they're really important, and that's kind of how I get my ideas out and explore, and that's kind of what I'm going to be chatting about a little bit today. But the bottom left there, the Noisy Girls Club, I worked with a designer called Angela Kirkwood, who's brilliant, and she actually ended up being my bridesmaid. Like, she's one of my closest pals, and so we worked on this together. It was a program for an event for She Is Fierce magazine, which is now The Delicate Rebellion, which you should look up. It's great. And so we kept it kind of risographed, so it was really bold, bright colors. You can't really see there, but it was like fluorescent pink, and yeah, it was really fun to work on. And I worked with her on the middle project there as well, which was called Block, which was all about creative block. How can we overcome it? What are some of the things that you can do? So this was kind of art direction that we were exploring, and it's not the tightest project, but it was really, really fun. And I think making sure that you're doing your job for fun and for joy is so important, as well as, you know, the work that you're creating. Every year as well, I like to take a week out to do a project, and I don't know what I'm going to do. So the local recipes there, that was an example of this. So I decided to do a zine with a friend of mine, Jenny, who's like an amazing cook. And so she gave me some of her recipes, and we pulled together this like risograph zine. I use risograph quite a lot because the colors are really great, and it's quite cheap as well. So that's kind of a really, really quick overview of some of my work. I think it's generally quite bold and playful, and I like to play with shape quite a lot. And in terms of what I'm going to kind of show you guys today, I was walking through the meadows on Saturday. Meadows. Yeah,
beautiful.
It's a big, beautiful park in Edinburgh. I live in a flat, so I don't have a garden, but the meadows is quite close, and socially distancing, of course. But the cherry blossom trees are out at the moment. There's rows and rows of them, and they look so beautiful. And I was trying to think about like what I could do today, what I could show, and I was thinking about hanami, which is the traditional. In Japan, they have hanami around this time, and it's when the cherry blossoms come out, and they all celebrate the cherry blossoms, go and look at them, and they have picnics in the park. And I really miss traveling, and I love Japan. I get a lot of inspiration from Japan. So this kind of inspired me to create a poster to celebrate the viewing of the cherry blossoms today. And I thought it's got quite a nice message around growth and renewal, and kind of reminding us that although all of this strange stuff is going on, it's going to pass. It's just temporary. So my plan today is to show you kind of a simple poster based around hanami, and hopefully show you some techniques that I use as well, using Illustrator and Photoshop. So if I kind of close this down, and I will...
Brilliant. In the meantime, we have a couple comments and a lot of Scots joining today, so it's great to see the community being excited. We have Angus, who said he walked through the meadows many times himself. There's Paul, who went to Edinburgh Uni. Oh no, Paul, Lindsay. Edinburgh Uni, yes, great. I went myself to Edinburgh University, so that's great to see. Yeah, just great comments and engagement from everyone. Great to see you guys. There was plenty more. I'm just scrolling up. Stirling, Ian, Central Scotland, the Glasgow as well. So yeah, great seeing you guys. And everyone's talking about the Fringe. and Arthur's Seat as well. So all the nice spots back in Edinburgh. Great to hear.
Great. Hello to everyone out there, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Absolutely.
So to begin with, I've opened an A3 document, and usually, obviously, if it's A3, you want it to be set to CMYK. But today, for the purposes of this, I'm just going to set it to RGB because I want the colors to really punch out. And I'll begin and I'll chat through my process. So I've got my A3 file open, and I've got a reference image here just to check back to. I should say as well, before I begin any project, I always start by doing sketches, and I've done some sketches which you can hopefully see here, if you can see me. And I just kind of do scribbles of shapes and playing with type and thinking about color and texture. And I think it's really important to begin with a sketch before you open any kind of software to kind of refer back to and just to get some ideas out. So I'm going to kind of refer to that throughout this, but I'm going to start by selecting my, I'm going to create a name for my layer because it's good to try and keep your layers tidy. So I'm just going to call this reference. And I'm going to lock this so that I can't select this as well. And we've got the kind of eye here, so you can turn that off and on. And then I'm going to go down and create a new layer. And I'm going to create a rectangle, and this is going to be my background to begin with. And I'm going to also create some color palette. So I'm going to color pick from this image. So I've just pressed I to get the eyedropper, and then I can click on certain parts of the image, and that's going to create a little color palette based on this reference to begin with. So we've got some orange in there, and I do this quite a lot. Color palettes I kind of color pick from photography, illustration. I find it's quite a quick way of just trying out different palettes. And then I might just create some secondary palettes by clicking in here.
So, Liah, we already have a question from Lindsay. Oh no,
Sure.
Lindsay, no, it was Chris, who is asking, do you have any suggestions on picking colors for a project?
Yeah, I mean, I usually spend quite a long time trying out different palettes and seeing what works. I guess it depends what you're doing. So if you want it to be really punchy, then I might go for bolder colors, or if I want it to be more sophisticated, I might go for a more muted palette. But I think color picking is like quite a quick way of me just trying things out, I would say. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that and your thoughts. So
That sounds great.
yeah, so I'm just going to color pick a couple different things to begin with here. There we go, the basics. And then I'm going to press the eyedropper and change the background color. So I'm going to double click into this layer, and I'm just going to call this background. And I'm going to lock that layer so that I can't touch anything there. And the concept that I had for this was to basically just take a cherry blossom flower and the circle from the Japanese flag and combine them. So I'm going to try out a couple of different ways of doing that, just to kind of mess around. And I think it's really good to make sure that you're just messing around and trying things out. And, you know, it doesn't matter if you make a mistake at this point. It's all about exploring and the process of it. So I'm going to take my pen tool by pressing P, and I'm going to just click to make a point, and you can drag it, creates this kind of vector line. And if you click and drag, you start to get this shape. So I'm just going to click some really rough points here to create my petal. And this kind of handle here, you can, if you press Alt, you can either drag it down, or you can just press P and click it so that it goes away. And then if I click a couple points here, I'm then going to press A, which is my direct selection tool. And if I drag over these points, we've got these circles here, and I'm just going to drag this to make it a little bit softer, which is quite a a fun thing to play with, because I want the flower to feel quite soft, and I'm going to just color pick the pink there. And this is going to be the basis of my flower, so I'm just really quickly going to copy and paste these to create my flower. Really roughly. And then I'm just going to really quickly draw a shape to fill in that kind of space in the middle there. And I always like to have my original here that you can refer back to, but I'm going to copy and paste that onto my artboard, and then I'm going to use the Pathfinder tool, which is really useful, and it's over here. It's got all of these different things that you can do, and I can never remember what they all do totally, but I'm going to click the Unite tool, and that's going to create like a full shape now, so that it gets rid of all of the points in the middle. And then on top of that, I'm just going to draw a circle as the kind of basis of my flower here, and I'll make that red. So that's going to be the beginning. And then I might try out some different flower shapes as well. So maybe I want to try something a little bit more abstract. So I'll maybe get a circle, make it pink. And if I press P, it's going to get rid of this point, and I can press A to tweak the handles here. And then if I want to copy and paste that, I can go up to Object, Transform, and Reflect to flip that over, make sure that vertical is selected, and then it kind of copies it over like this. So this might be a simpler flower, something a little bit more abstract. And then I also want to add some text. So I'm going to call this my flower. Flower. And then I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to go to Adobe Typekit. So I'm going to go up here, which
Ben is asking, what did you say was the keybind for removing one arm of the handle?
Oh, let me just, this one. So you hold down, you have to make sure that your pen tool is selected, and you hold down Alt, and then you can drag this around. It's quite a handy thing to learn. It takes a little while to get your head around how to use the pen tool, but it's a really powerful tool once you've kind of learned how to do it. So I'd recommend just practicing trying out shapes to begin with. Yeah. So I'm going to go down here to fonts, which is going to open Adobe Typekit, and I'll drag that into my screen so you can see it. And this is really great because there are so many fonts on here, and you get it with your Creative Cloud package, and you can see there are lots of different classifications here, and you can click into the different properties if you want something a little bit more condensed or a bit more extended, and you can also search for fonts here as well. For today, I've already found a font that I'm going to use because we're kind of short on time. So I'm going to find the one that I was looking at was HWT Arts by Eric Speakerman, who is a really brilliant type designer. You should look him up. And I quite like this because it was by the Hamilton Wood Type Foundry, which I think is quite a nice tie-in to the post that we're looking at today. And all you do to get it installed is to click this button. So I've already activated it, but you click it, and then it just syncs to your Illustrator seamlessly. It's really easy to use, and it's great. So I've already got that in here. So if I type out Hanami, that's my word that I'm going to use today, and then I go up here to was it HWT Arts, and I pressed to get the text. I pressed T. It's really good to use shortcuts. It makes things a lot quicker, but it's also here on my toolbar. And then in here, I can double click into it, and I can press Alt and the arrow key if I want to kern the letters individually, or I can select it all and I can go over here to my character panel and I can change the tracking if I want it to be wider or not as wide. And then once I've kind of got it roughly how I want it, I'm going to again bring my original down here and I'm going to copy and paste it, and I'm going to go up to type and create outlines, which makes each letter a bit more editable. And I'm going to make this a different color. So let's just go for purple or something. And one of the cool things that you can do, which I'll show you how to do, is to, if I paste this, you can do some 3D stuff, which looks quite cool. So if you select it and you go up to Effect and go to 3D and Extrude and Bevel, you can see that it starts to look 3D here, which is quite a handy thing to use. And you can move this to change the 3D look of it. And one that I use quite a lot is to, well, again, you can change the depth of it here. I like to go here and click no shading. So it looks kind of like this, which is a bit strange. But then when you go into it, if you go up to Object and Expand so that it's nice and editable, if you press A to get your direct selection tool and you highlight each of these faces and then eyedrop another color, you get quite a nice 3D effect there. Just as a technique that I use to show you guys. And let's see some other things that we could do. So if I do a new artboard, it's quite good to have new artboards so that you can just try out new things. I'm gonna copy my background over to try something different out. Let's try this more abstract one. So another thing that I use quite a lot is the mesh tool, which is down here, and this takes quite a while to get used to. If I click on here, you can see that you can create depth. So if I select this point and change the color, you can get some quite interesting results. And then if you want to add more points, you go to the mesh tool and you can add more points this way. And again, you can just eyedrop other colors.
We have a question from Paul. He's asking, what is the key difference between artboards and layers in Illustrator?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So an artboard, if you imagine like a painting, an artboard is your canvas and your layers are like layering on the paint. So your artboard is the kind of the background area that you work within. Whereas the layers, you can turn these on and off. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah,
it's a good way to describe it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a couple of cheeky people who are saying it's looking like Pac-Man with a cherry.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. What else can I do? Yeah, so I might also want to tweak the type slightly and do something a little bit more playful. So if I copy this over, I might, for example, mimic some of the curves within the petals. So maybe I'll make some kind of circles as decoration down the side here. I think it's always good to try and experiment with your type and see what you can do with it. And type gets great because all of the licensing is sorted, so you can edit the type. While I'm doing this, Emma, what was your favorite part of Edinburgh?
Ooh, so see, you already showed the meadows, so how can I beat that? But I loved Portobello, actually. That was a great little spot. Yeah, I went to Edinburgh Uni, so I was definitely spending a lot of time around George Square and yeah, that area. But yeah, Blackford Hill, the Pentlands, just a lot of time outdoors, right?
Yeah.
That was lovely. I haven't been back in ages, probably 4 years, something like that, 3-4 years.
Oh, you need to come back.
I know, when the time allows me to.
Yeah.
We're all
I
missing
was just
traveling.
there as a tourist,
you?
or well, I was there for business, but then I did the typical tourist things, went to the castle. But
You
it has
did?
a great view. I love the view from the castle to the sea and the cliffs, and
Yeah.
saw a seal as well, which was great.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's such a popular tourist spot, but we were just talking about this before the stream with Leah, that we haven't. I mean, you haven't been to the tattoo, you were saying, and I haven't been to the castle actually. So 5 years there, and I still didn't take half of the key spots. But yeah,
It's very nice. Like it's different with all these stones, and it just looks a bit like a fairy tale, and beautiful views from up there.
Yeah.
A couple of people commenting, yeah, the castle. Angus is saying Arthur's Seat is his favorite. So we've gone into a sidetrack Edinburgh tour. And a couple of comments on your work as well, going back to that. Angus is saying, I use Artboards a lot. You can create a raft of graphics and export by Artboards to get individual files. Really handy with logo variations.
Another thing that I'll show you guys, which is quite handy as well, is I'm going to make a scatter brush. So I'm just going to make a bunch of random shapes here. And then I'm going to select all of that and go up to Window and go to Brushes. In fact, I'm going to change the color of this so that it's a different color first of all. Let's make it like I know that there's yellow in a cherry blossom, so let's make a nice yellow color. So then I go to Window and I go to my brushes and I go to New brush here, and I'm going to make it a scatter brush and click OK. And then there are all these kind of different settings here, so you can change the size and the spacing when you kind of move these around. But I'm going to keep that as is and press OK. And this is quite cool because then when you press B to get your brush up, you can create quite quick, interesting shapes like this. So I guess it's almost like maybe cherry blossoms in the wind or something like that. So I'll just drag that out of the way. I'm not being very tidy with my layers, but you should be. I should say as well, I'm not using grids at this stage because I'm just kind of messing around. But if there's any students out there, there's this book that's like my holy grail, Grid Systems by Joseph Miller Brockman, and it's really good to sit and experiment with your grids as well. I'm not going to go into that today because we don't have time, but yeah, it's quite important to make sure you're using your grid.
It's like your little night desk Bible right there.
Yeah.
Handy.
Let's see, what else am I going to try out? So I've got some elements here. So I'm going to kind of go into Photoshop now, maybe. So I'm going to open up Photoshop and I'm going to go File, New, and I'm going to go make sure that A3 is selected. So you can go up here, Print, View All Presets, go to A3, and 300 is kind of print size. 72 is what you'd usually use for screen. Again, if I want to print my poster, I should set it to CMYK, but for the purposes of today, I'm just going to keep it RGB and keep the colors really vibrant. So I've got my background here. I'll just drag this down slightly.
We have a couple comments. Sandrine is saying, now I'm wondering if you could use the scatter brush to create a very tiny textured brush.
Oh, yeah, I think you could do like a gradient, for example. So if I copy and paste this over here, down here you've got your gradient tool. So if I click on that, you've got your gradient here, and there's loads of different settings in here. So this one, for example, I'll just show you really quickly, is quite good. It's similar to the mesh tool, but it's got a different kind of handling on it. So if you click Edit Gradient, you can add points of color which is quite good, but I'm gonna off topic a little bit there. So you've got your gradient. You could spend time, you know, clipping mask textures into it, for example, and then you would just go to brush, create new, same as before, scatter brush. Ooh, select artwork. Oh, maybe you can't. Maybe, I'm not actually sure on that one. I would need to come back to that. Do you guys know?
We're just confusing you with some questions. You're like mid-process and I'm throwing things at you.
No, but I know a workaround, if that makes sense. You can convert that into a swatch, and then you can use it as a background. So if you go to your swatch tool, which is above your brushes.
Let's see. Oh, yeah, in here.
Yeah. Then you can just drag and drop it in there. Yeah, or new swatch. I think if you scroll down, it should be there already.
Oh, right, yeah, there it is.
Yeah. And then when you create a rectangle shape or something, which is the background, and then you put this one in, like you select this swatch for that rectangle, then this is there basically. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's a workaround. So I'm not an expert with brushes, but
yeah,
swatches is another option.
There we go. Learn something every day.
We all learn something new every day. Yeah, like with all the different guests and wizards that we have here.
Yeah. In fact,
I'll the word.
I'll share something with you. So I didn't actually know how to do this until yesterday, and I probably should have known how to do it, but it's really useful. So if you want to make a quick pattern, for example, you create your circle, and then if you hold down, you make sure that your pen tool is selected, not your pen tool, V, your arrow tool. You hold down Alt, and then you get these two arrows, and then if you drag it along and hold Shift so that it locks into place, and then you do Command D, it just copies it and pastes it like magic. And for the past 7 years, I've just been copying and pasting circles. So I thought that was pretty handy. I shouldn't have met that on this, but there you go. And then, you know, if you want to, you can do it like even diagonally, which is like, nope, Command D, there we go, which is great. And then you can create this kind of really quick pattern. And then you can select all of that. I'll just show you how to clip it into shape because it can be quite useful. So let's say we make this orange and we group it. And then we get this shape on top here, and I'm just gonna unify it or unite it there. And then you select both of these and you go Object, Clipping Mask, Make, and you get this nice pattern inside. And if you double click it, you can then like edit it if you want to scale it up or down, which can be quite effective. And then you can just drag that on top and it creates a nice pattern. So there's different ways to do things. There's stuff that I'm still learning as well. But yeah, so I've got my Photoshop file open, and I've got my background layer. So this is my artboard. So I'm going to actually create this into a proper artboard. So if I go up here and select my artboard tool and just drag on top of that, it turns it into an artboard. And then you can click each of these points to add other artboards around it. So it works slightly differently to Illustrator. But then you can see here that you've got your artboards on the side. So if I delete that second one, I'm just going to call this, let's call it Canvas. And then I'm going to go into Illustrator, and I'm just going to copy each of these into my Photoshop here. So, and then I get this little thing that comes up, and I just click Smart Object, which means that I can open it back up in Illustrator if I double click it. So if I want to go back in fact, I'll show you an example of this. So let's say I'm going to pick my flower here, and I copy and paste that in here. If I want to tweak it, I just double click this and it opens it back up in Illustrator, and then I might, you know, tweak the points slightly, for example. And when I close that down, it changes it in Photoshop, which is quite useful to go into. And I'm going to just copy my text over, which is here. There we go, as a basis. And actually, I'm going to do the flower again. I'm going to do it as 2 separate points because I'm going to mask into the background of the flower. I'll show you how to do that. So we've got our background layer, and then we've got our circle here. And earlier I found some textures online, so I went to, I think it was Graphic Burger has some really good free textures that you can use. And so this was just like a plywood one. I thought the texture was quite interesting, and I'm gonna drag this into here, and so we've got all of our layers here, and we can move these up and down so that if I want this to be further back, I just drag this down, and you can see here that it goes down between the different layers. But I'm gonna hold down Alt, and then you see that that little symbol changes, and if I click kind of between these two, it's going to mask it to my vector there. And you can create some quite interesting effects here. So I'm going to go and I'm going to play with my adjustments here as well. If you click on this, there's loads of different options. I'm going to click Gradient Map, and I'm going to mask that into this again. And you can see that these are the colors here. So if I want to edit the colors, I just click onto it, and then I can click the colors and I can change them. And it creates quite an interesting sort of texture. Let's make that lighter. Just trying to do this fairly quickly today, but there we go. And then you can't really see it that well. So again, if I click down here, I'm going to play with the levels a bit. So I'm going to go to brightness and contrast, and I'm going to up the contrast, maybe tweak the brightness slightly. And again, I'm going to go down to my levels here. And there's loads of different things that you can do in there. So it's good to play around and see what those are. But here you can start to see the pattern is coming through, and it's quite interesting. And then I might go into Illustrator and take this scatter brush. Let's see if we can, let's maybe bring that through. So if I copy that into here, I can start to create my composition. And maybe I want to change the color. If you want to change the color, you can double click. And there are all of these options in here to do different things with your layer. So if you click color overlay, it's going to change the color, which you just edit in here, and you can change the opacity of it. So if you want it to be closer to how it was before, you can tweak that. You can do drop shadows in here by playing with these kind of things. Outer glow, there's all kinds of stuff. So I won't go into it because we don't have time, but that can be quite fun to play with. Again, let's create another brush, and I'm going to put this one to the back. So if I paste that in, I'm going to just send this down here. And this isn't very neat, but it's always good to try and keep everything named and keep it neat. It just makes things much easier. But I'm just doing it quite quickly today because of time. And then I might want to mask some of this. So if I go down here, I've got my mask, and it creates this rectangle. And then if I press my brush, you can mask some of it out if you want to. And if you want to mask it out with a harder edge, you can go up here and you can just drag this hardness right up, and then it's kind of less of a fade, which can be quite useful as well. So then you start to get your poster coming together. Again, this is the new layer, so I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to clip that into here, and I'm maybe going to brush into it a little bit with a softer brush. This starts to give you that kind of Procreate feeling. if you've used that, you can create some quite nice touches with it. And again, you can tweak the opacity. There are all of these things down here which do different things to the colors as well, which you can play with. So I use multiply quite a lot, but for this, I'll leave it as is. Do you guys have any questions at all out there?
Some questions, yeah.
Sure.
Izzy is asking, any advice for getting work experience in this industry? I'm a first-year textile student at Leeds University and have a year of work experience coming up.
Yeah, so I didn't actually really cover any of that, did I? But when I didn't actually study graphic design. I didn't get onto the graphic design course, and I wanted to do it. There weren't any placements, so I wrote to places because I thought I've got nothing to lose. I think it's really important to just try and put yourself out there, and it can be really scary. And a lot of the time, you know, you're probably going to get like rejections. It takes time to find somewhere, but once you get that bit of work experience, you can put that down, and it's easier to get, you know, work experience or to get a foot into a job. When I applied for my job at Whitespace, there weren't any jobs going, but I applied for it anyway because, again, I was like, I've got nothing to lose and I really want to work there, and it kind of paid off. And I think that's partly because I had worked in a smaller studio beforehand, and so, you know, I had a bit of experience, but I think it was also partly kind of down to being in the right place at the right time. But I think it's good to write to as many places as you can and try as many places as you can, especially when you're starting out. I think it's good to try larger studios and smaller studios and see, like, you know, what kind of work you like to do as well. Yeah, I think like bigger studios and smaller studios have pros and cons. So I just say try and put yourself out there. Make sure that you've got a portfolio, a website, a Behance page put together to show your work so that whoever is looking at it can see it quite quickly. Make sure you've got a cover letter that is personalized to whoever you're writing to as well. You know, make sure that your work that you're pulling together is nicely designed. I don't think it has to be crazy. It doesn't need to be a zany idea. It can just be a beautifully designed PDF or whatever. I guess it depends what industry you're going into. From a design perspective, I think it's all about making sure that you have you share the principles of design in whatever your CV or whatever it is that you're showing. Whereas if you are going into like the advertising world, for example, I think maybe you want something that's that idea that's a bit more out there, perhaps, or again, kind of judging by the agency that you're going for, what's their style, what's their culture like, and trying to make sure that you're showing that you kind of fit in there, I guess. Does that kind of make sense?
Makes sense.
Plenty of advice, yeah.
We have another question from Stuart. Do you texture much in Illustrator to do shading, or do you prefer Photoshop?
I create textures in Illustrator as well. I think you can get more. I think that the color and the texture can be a bit richer in Photoshop, but you know, if you want to scale up the texture, it works better in Illustrator, and I'll show you how to do that. So if I open this same texture up in Illustrator, in fact, before I do that, you need to tweak the levels in Photoshop so that you get a cleaner texture. So I'm going to make this black and white, and I'm going to tweak the brightness and the contrast here. And up the levels so that it's quite a harsh contrast. If this works, it should work. There we go. And then I'm going to do Command A to select all of it, and Shift Command C, Shift Command V to copy and paste it. And then I'm going to just drag this into my Illustrator here. And then I'm going to go to Window and Image Trace. And then if you click on your preview, it's quite a complex image, so it might take a short amount of time. But then there are all of these kind of settings in here, and this turns your texture into a vector, and you can get some quite interesting textures from this as well. And then if you click into advanced, you can then play with the paths and the corners and the noise, so you can get less or more of a texture. And also if you click ignore white here in the background, that's quite useful, because it gets rid of all of the white. Otherwise you might need to just select it and remove it manually, which can take quite a lot of time. So then if I go to object and expand, it creates like this kind of editable texture. So this is a texture as well, but you get quite a different feel to, you know, this one in here. So I guess it depends kind of what you're going for, and if you want it to be scaled up easily, then a vector is quite a good way to do it. Does that answer that question?
Probably. We have Kari asking, is there anywhere to network in Edinburgh with other creatives?
Ooh, tons. Go ahead, Liah.
Yeah. So if you after this, if you skip to the beginning of my talk, I had some really cool places to go in Edinburgh, events. I think Creative Edinburgh in Edinburgh is a really good one. They have a lot of events, and everyone is so friendly, and there's such a mix of creatives, and it's quite a non-scary way of networking with people, because I think networking can be quite intimidating. So Creative Edinburgh is great. I would also say there's this thing called Long Lunch, which is great, and it's kind of between Edinburgh and Glasgow, and we have like amazing speakers, you know, like Paula Scher from Pentagram came, which was like incredible, and like a lot of the creatives go for a pint afterwards, and it's quite a good way of meeting people in a kind of, again, a non-scary way, and everyone's so friendly in Scotland, so you know, everyone kind of knows each other, and I would say that those are quite good ways of kind of networking. What else? Ladies Wine Design is great as well, which there are quite a few events that happen quite regularly, and it's quite a small group of people, so that's not too intimidating. And yeah, there's so many. There's like, I don't know if Creative Pints is still happening, but that was one. There's Gab, which again, they have amazing speakers in Glasgow. I could go on and on. But yeah,
Glasgow has a great creative community, and we also have the ECA, I know, was hosting some events. I mean, obviously now it's a bit tricky, but always keeping an eye on Eventbrite and what's going on in the world out there is you know, a nice way to do it. And I feel like you know one person, and then you kind of grow your network as well. So always keep in touch with that. And the different agencies are always hosting events as well. I don't know about Whitespace, but I know in the past couple of years there's been a lot going on. So yeah, answers that question. And James was asking, where do you get your inspiration from? So that's your standard creative question, but give us a little bit of an insight into your creative process.
Yeah, so I kind of get it from, this is kind of a bit cliched, but I get it from everywhere. I get it from, you know, I go to a lot of charity shops, and I go through like old books, and I buy books on like really random things, like, you know, a book of ballet dancers, and or a book of the cinema. I watch a lot of films. I love vintage clothes. I get a lot of inspiration from Japan. Japan is like my favorite place in the whole world. Everyone's sick of me talking about Japan. When I went there, it was just like sensory overload. There was just like lights and sounds and smells, and it was incredible. So I love to travel. I think it's really good to travel if you can, to try and expand your knowledge of different cultures, and just visually what's going on. You know, like I was lucky enough to go to Mexico a couple of years, and it was like so vibrant, and everything was like painted crazy colors, and just like, again, just like total sensory overload, but in a slightly different way. I'd say Tokyo is more like neon. So travel is a great way of getting inspiration. I do use like Pinterest as well. I think all designers kind of go to Pinterest and that kind of thing and see what other people are doing. But I find that the most interesting work I do comes from like my surroundings or my thoughts. So just taking note of like what's going on around you. And quite often I'll just go for a walk and I'll listen to music, and I'll just walk around like without a purpose. And that's when kind of ideas will come to me as well. I think some people, you know, they find it in the shower, but for me, it's just walking around and like taking note of my surroundings, I think. How about you guys?
Yeah, we have to ask
travel is
in the chat. I know travel is one of those. I think that's for everyone, right? Just experiencing something new and being open to that is always a nice experience as well. And this is what Angus is saying in the chat. He's saying, just look around you. And I think everyone's just being a bit more aware of that right now in this circumstances. So we're feeling lucky we can be out and go on a walk once a day and still being safe and having a look around. So
well, I should say as well, I was meant to be in Barcelona last week at OFF Festival, which is OFFF. And I tried, and that is one of the most inspirational places you can go. And it's been postponed because of this till September, so maybe they'll have more tickets, I don't know. But they have speakers from all over the world. And honestly, like the standard of work that you see over there is just insane, and it's so inspiring. And again, everyone's so lovely, and you can be walking around and you can have like Jessica Hish come on, walk past you. And I don't know, it's a really amazing place. And then there's like a big after party at the end, which is great as well. So I'd recommend like looking at OFF Festival if you can. And it's nice and hot usually, and you can have beers and sit outside, and there's like a big screen with all of the speakers, which is brilliant. So that's a really inspiring place for me as well. You just leave and you're like, I want to be like, you know, as good as them. So it kind of empowers you a little bit, I'd say.
Brilliant. Sounds like bliss. Being in the sun.
Are there any other questions?
I think you can keep going with the process, and we'll keep on throwing them at you while you go.
Okay.
Just conscious of time as well. I want to see more of you in your poster.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think what else could we. So we might want to play with composition a little bit at this point as well. So let's see if we make a new artboard. I try and work quite quickly and just try things out. Yeah. I try not to be too precious about it. I find that's where you get the most kind of varied ideas coming out. So let's see if we want to outline a stroke. So if we want to outline the stroke, we go up here and click on, and we can create an outline. You can tweak the size of the stroke here to make something feel a bit bolder. So let's see if we copy and paste this. Maybe we want to move the placement of the text.
I actually read, Liah, that you had something for retro sweets packaging, and that was part of your little inspiration when you were kind of intrigued younger and, you know, wanted to get into design, and packaging was one of those things that you were always intrigued by.
Yeah, I like the kind of the bold colors and the shapes and things, and also record covers. My mom, she always had like records in the house, and like I always thought the covers were really amazing. So I think that was probably one of my earliest introductions to graphic design without realizing it. I didn't really know what graphic design was until I got to college, I think. And then I was like, this is cool. People do this to get paid. This is brilliant. I want to do that.
Make a living out of this.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's good to just try things out. You know, go in and maybe tweak your colors and try different textures. See what works, what doesn't.
We have Brian asking if this is saved, this video. It is. You can watch it on replay as well. So if you want to go back on the process, it will be on our YouTube channel in the UK, so you can watch all of this again. And Hannah is also asking which key books you would recommend reading and using to develop skills within illustration and its core concepts, if you have any in mind.
Oh, illustration. I'm trying to think.
Under the spotlight immediately. Just no, you recommended that book earlier on. I don't know if
I can show you some of the books I have here. Go on. So let's see. This was my grid systems book, which I recommend to students. Yep, it's brilliant.
Someone was asking for the author of that. Actually, did you mention that?
Yes, it's Joseph Muller-Brockman. here, so you can screenshot that. There you go.
Brilliant.
And then I've got my big Eames book, Charles and Ray Eames. They are designers. They were architects, illustrators, graphic design, product design. They did everything, and their work was super playful and brilliant. You can read about them online as well. I also love the Memphis period. So I've got a big book on Sotsas, and this is all really kind of playful geometric shapes and things, which is not illustration. And then I've got like an old book on Airside, which was a really cool design studio back in the day, and just all of their crazy work. I also have a subscription to Stack magazine, which I recommend, which is you get a beautifully designed magazine every month. And it's not necessarily about design, it's just about random topics, really interesting topics, but it's just beautifully designed just to get, inspiration from lots of different areas. I have loads of magazines. I've got like old graphic magazines, design magazines. I would say go on eBay and try and find old graphic design books where you can, and like really try and learn from the past, because there's so much rich kind of stuff that's happened in the past that all influences what's going on now. Try and look into lots of different areas. That doesn't really help with illustration, does it?
That's fine. It was your little list of reads. So
yeah,
that's already a good start.
But yeah, so this is not like the total finished poster, but hopefully it gives you a little insight into like my process and some different techniques that you can use, and just not being too precious about stuff, making sure that you're working on personal projects that bring you joy, as well as like the client work that you're doing. I find that a lot of the personal work I do informs my day-to-day work. So I think it's really important to just experiment and try stuff out.
We have Dan asking, do you have any advice for coming up with ideas for personal projects?
So I guess for me, whenever I have an idea, I write it down in my phone. I have like a list of like loads of stuff. There's some stupid stuff, or there's some stuff where I'm like, oh, that could be quite interesting. Or I might go to the pub with like a friend of mine, and we'll just kind of come up with ideas together and kind of just brainstorm. So I might sit down and think of it, or it might just kind of come to me naturally, I guess. But just taking note of stuff that interests you, stuff that's on your mind, I think is probably quite a good way to do it. There was one year I made a dress because I was watching Mad Men, and there's a character called Peggy who has really cool clothes, and she had this awesome blue dress with like these red kind of stripes down the side, and I was like, oh, I want that dress, but I couldn't find it anywhere, so I tried to make it. So just, I guess if there's something that interests you, just to act on it, I would say.
Great advice.
Words of wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah, I always say when people ask me, should you be good in every kind of field or something, I always say, I don't think so. I think there's always your one focus that you're good in, but I feel the other things should still be kind of your hobby to inspire you and to get out of your comfort zone and just do something else. So for example, I love photography, but just as a hobby. But as you, I love to travel. I used to travel a lot, and I have just been taking pictures wherever I was. And yeah, it just inspires me for a lot of things.
Yeah.
We've pretty much come up to time, haven't we, Emma?
Joined by so many people today. Great having you, everyone. But yeah, Liah, there's to this, and I know you had a lot of plan, but everyone can find your Instagram as well. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, of course. Emma is unfortunately breaking off, so I'm here in London with my fiber internet, and I'm going to say goodbye to Liah and to all of you guys in the chat. Of course, thank you very, very much for joining. Emma and I are here every day with UK creatives from noon to 1 p.m. UK time. We have a lot of new artists lined up for this week, so please tune in tomorrow for Emma and me from noon to 1. And of course, thank you so much, Liah, for joining us. That was a great exercise, and I think people have learned a lot and very good advice. So thank you very much for joining us. Do you want to say any last sentence to our viewers?
Oh, just I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me. And if there are any students out there, for example, that want anyone to look over their portfolio or whatever, I'm happy to do so. Please get in touch.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Liah. And thanks, Emma, and all of you in the chat. See you next time, tomorrow, 12.
Bye.
Bye.